Welcome to Scary True Stories. What I'm about to share with you is not fiction, but the terrifying memories of real people who truly lived through them. Don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe, and leave a comment telling me where you're listening from. Now, let's begin. That night, the rain was relentless. The sky was pitch black, splitting open only when lightning tore across it, flooding the road below in harsh white light. The street ahead of me was deserted, no cars, no people, nothing but water glistening across the asphalt. I sat behind the wheel of my old Ford Fusion, gripping it tight with both hands. The wipers slashed back and forth at full speed, but the windshield was nothing more than a sheet of water. Distant streetlights blurred into pale yellow halos, flickering like weak candles in the storm. Rain hammered on the roof, tires hissed and groaned against the slick pavement. Wind howled through every seam of the car. All of it blended into a heavy, suffocating soundtrack. Inside the cramped cabin, the only other sound was my heartbeat, fast, insistent, pounding like it knew something was about to happen. And then it did. Through the downpour, a pale figure darted across the road. For the briefest second, I saw it clearly: a person, head down, running full speed, dressed head to toe in white. My chest clenched. My foot slammed the brake on instinct. Screech! The tires shrieked against the soaked pavement. The car fishtailed violently. I jerked the wheel, desperate to avoid impact, but the tires slid uselessly, gliding on a sheet of water. The Fusion spun sideways, rain blasting against the windshield in sheets. Then, crash! The front of the car slammed into a tree with a bone-rattling impact. The entire frame shuddered. The seatbelt locked tight across my chest as the airbag exploded into my face. The cabin filled instantly with the acrid stench of burned chemicals and fabric dust. In that moment, everything blurred into sound: the roar of the rain, the dying cough of the engine, and the violent pounding of my own heartbeat, threatening to burst out of my chest. I was dazed, breath ragged, my face stinging where the airbag had hit. Smoke and the sharp odor of melting plastic seeped in from the crumpled hood. Warning lights flashed red on the dashboard, the fuel gauge needle trembling, the engine wheezing before it finally went silent. I forced myself to move, flexing my arms and legs, checking for pain. No blood, no broken bones. Somehow, I was intact, but the Fusion was destroyed, its front end crushed into the tree, rain pouring through fresh cracks in the windshield. Hands shaking, I pulled out my phone. I called my dad first, my voice cracked, barely able to get the words out as I gave him my location. Then I dialed roadside assistance, fighting to steady my breathing, fighting not to break down right there on the line. I sat there, alone, inside the twisted shell of my car, rain crashing down like a waterfall. Each drop hammered against the roof, sharp and relentless, blending with the pounding of my heart inside my chest. Streetlights flickered through the fogged glass, casting the cabin in a sickly yellow glow that made everything feel colder than it was. I kept telling myself, just wait. Wait for Dad. Wait for the tow truck. But deep inside, a creeping unease was spreading, a feeling that something else was coming. Through the sheets of rain, I suddenly saw him. A man. He stood right outside the driver's window. His clothes were all white, but soaked through until the fabric clung to his skin, streaked with gray patches under the flickering light. His hair was plastered to his forehead, streams of water running down his pale face. He leaned close, pressing his face against the glass. Rain poured between us, but I could still see every detail. His eyes narrowed, fixed on me with an intensity that felt invasive, like he was dissecting every movement I made. And then the mouth. He opened it wide, shaping a perfect O. Silent, empty, no sound at all. Just that void pressed against the glass, like he was trying to drain the very air out of the car. Slowly, his hand rose. Fingers thin, bluish, clawed at the window. Screech. Screech. The sound cut through the storm, sharper than the rain, slicing into my nerves. I froze. My own breath fogged the inside of the window, layering over the streams of water from his face outside. For a moment, it felt like we were fused together, me trembling inside, him pressing closer from out there, separated by nothing but a thin sheet of glass. Then, suddenly, the scratching stopped. His hand snapped down to the door handle. He yanked it hard, again and again. The entire door rattled as if it might rip off the hinges. I threw myself sideways, slammed the lock down, my hand trembling so badly I almost missed it. When it didn't open, he grew more violent. He stepped back, then drove his elbow straight into the glass. Thud, thud, thud. Each strike shook the entire frame. Spiderweb cracks spreading across the window, illuminated in each flash of lightning. My breath caught. Condensation blurred the twisted shape of his face, but the sound of each blow was closer, heavier, like he'd break through at any second. In blind panic, I grabbed my phone, screaming over the rain and the pounding glass. "Dad, hurry. He's trying to break in. I'm still in the car. I'm so scared." My voice cracked, breaking apart under the sound of the storm hammering the roof, the pounding fists of the man outside, and the wild drumbeat of my heart. In that moment, all I could do was cling to the phone, praying my dad would get there before the thin glass between us shattered. And then, headlights, blazing through the sheets of rain. A car skidded to a stop in the middle of the road. I recognized it instantly. Dad's truck. He was out of the cab almost before the wheels stopped turning. Without a word, without hesitation, he charged straight at the man in white who was still slamming against my window. The collision was violent, lost in the roar of the downpour. My dad tackled him hard, the two of them crashing to the soaked pavement, rolling through puddles, water spraying up around them. Their struggle was a blur of limbs and guttural shouts, half swallowed by thunder. The man fought like an animal, twisting and thrashing, but my dad held on, driving him into the ground with everything he had. My own hands were trembling, gripping the phone so tightly it hurt, my eyes fixed through the fogged, rain-streaked glass. In the strobing light of the storm, the scene looked warped, like an old film reel my father wrestling a stranger with a face twisted into something inhuman. Minutes later, the sound of sirens cut through the storm. Blue and red lights sliced across the curtain of rain. Police officers rushed in, pulling the man off the ground, forcing his arms behind his back. Click! The cuffs locked into place. He was hauled to his feet, head hanging low, water dripping steadily from his soaked white clothes. And that's when I heard his name for the first time. Marcus Green. A name that meant nothing to me until that night. A name that has haunted me ever since. The next morning, my Ford Fusion was towed to a garage. The mechanic took one look at the crushed front end, the broken frame, the ruined engine, and just shook his head. "This car's done for," he said flatly. But I didn't care about the wreck. What haunted me wasn't the metal or the loss. It was his face pressed against the glass, eyes narrowed and cold, mouth stretched wide into that silent "oh." The police contacted me again and again, urging me to testify in court. They needed me to tell the story, to face Marcus Green one more time. I refused, not out of fear that he'd come after me, but because I couldn't bear it, the thought of describing that twisted face again, of seeing it replay in my mind as the words left my mouth. Even now, just thinking about it is enough to send a chill crawling across my skin, every hair standing on end. Years have passed, life has gone on, but that memory has never faded. Every time the rain pours hard, I find myself glancing toward the side window, the same one where that face had pressed against the glass that night. And for a split second, I almost see it again. The gaping O of his mouth, silent, waiting to swallow the breath right out of me. And I know one thing with absolute certainty. That memory will never leave me. It lingers like an invisible scar, a reminder that what happened that stormy night wasn't a nightmare. It was real. That sweltering August night, the air was so heavy and suffocating that even the hot gusts of wind scraped harshly across my skin. A summer storm was rolling and thick black clouds bunched together overhead, pressing down like a weight, and then, boom! The first crack of thunder tore through the night, echoing as if it had struck right in our backyard. At that exact moment, my 6-year-old son leapt up, his eyes glowing with excitement in the flash of lightning through the window. He grabbed my hand, begging with that eager little voice I knew all too well. "Dad, let's go to the gazebo. Let's watch the rain." I couldn't help but laugh softly. To him, storms weren't frightening at all. To him, they were adventures, tiny, magical escapes that the two of us always looked forward to sharing. We dashed out into the downpour, drenched in seconds before ducking under the gazebo at the far end of the yard. Rainwater pounded against the roof, drumming out a frantic rhythm that filled the night. Under that familiar shelter, everything was just as it always was. The small television mounted in the corner, The old wicker chairs that still carried the scent of aged wood, the round little table beside the mini fire pit that still held a faint warmth from the last time it burned. It wasn't much, but it was perfect. Our little hideaway, like a secret room, meant only for the two of us. We sank into the chairs, listening to the relentless downpour outside and the thunder that rolled across the sky. My son leaned against my shoulder, his bright eyes fixed on the curtain of rain. It was one of those rare moments of peace. Despite the chaos raging outside, we were cocooned in our safe corner of the world, just the storm, the rain, and the steady rhythm of our hearts. The sky rumbled again, then erupted into a blinding flash. For a split second, the entire yard lit up so bright that every rain-soaked leaf shimmered silver, as if coated in metal. Each time the lightning split across the sky, the backyard appeared frozen, like a giant black and white photograph, every tree, every shadow captured in stark detail. The swaying branches became distorted figures, and the gazebo that sheltered us stretched out its crooked shadow across the flooded tiles. With every flash, the familiar world outside seemed to transform into something eerie, something uncanny, like there was something else lurking out there, hidden within my own backyard. I was leaning back, letting myself relax, when my son suddenly bolted upright. His little finger trembled as he pointed straight toward the far edge of the yard. "Dad, there's someone out there," he cried, his voice thin and shaking, nearly swallowed by the roar of the rain. I narrowed my eyes, following the direction he pointed, but in the pitch-black night, I could only see drenched tree trunks and the thick shadows of the forest. There was no one there. My heart tightened. Instinct told me I couldn't dismiss the panic of a child. I gripped the armrest, eyes locked on the darkness outside. And then, I waited for the next flash of lightning, for the truth to be revealed in that blinding white light. A bolt ripped across the sky, lighting up the yard as if someone had fired a giant camera flash. And in that split-second burst, I saw it, right at the edge of the forest, standing on the line between shadow and the rain-soaked clearing. There was a figure, tall, lanky, its head covered by a hood or dark coat. It stood completely still, as if it had been there all along, waiting for someone to notice. When the light died, the image was swallowed back into the thick night. But that silhouette had already burned itself into my mind. A chill shot down my spine. I couldn't see the face, but I knew without doubt someone was silently watching my family. My heart pounded so hard it felt like it might burst, but reason forced me to keep my voice steady. I turned, grabbed my son's shoulder, and whispered firmly, "Run inside right now. Turn on all the backyard lights for me." He didn't ask a single question, his eyes still wide with fear. Then he sprinted through the rain and vanished into the house. I stayed frozen under the gazebo, eyes locked on the tree line, every second stretched tight like a string about to snap. Just 10 seconds later, golden floodlights outside suddenly flared to life. The whole yard was ripped out of the darkness. But he was gone. The patch of ground at the forest's edge was empty, only the trees thrashing violently in the storm wind. No figure, not a trace. As if what I'd seen was just a hallucination, but I knew it wasn't. We gathered in the living room, turning the television volume up high, as if familiar noise could drown out the pounding of the rain outside. The screen flickered with light, but no one was really watching the movie playing. I saw my wife try to smile as she made our son a cup of hot milk, but her hand shook so badly that it spilled over the rim. The air inside was no calmer than the storm outside. Then, suddenly, my son gripped my sleeve tightly, his voice trembling. "Dad, someone's standing outside my bedroom window." The whole room froze. My wife went pale, the cup nearly slipping from her hand. I whipped my head toward the hallway leading upstairs, my heart pounding in my chest. Outside, thunder boomed again, swallowing the words that had just left my son's mouth. I knew this wasn't over. I clenched the baseball bat in my hand, the wooden grip cold and damp, as if it had absorbed the sweat from my palms. Taking a deep breath, I walked straight to the light switch. With one press, every outdoor lamp flared to life, golden beams cutting through the rain like 1,000 glinting needles. But in my head, my son's trembling voice still echoed. Someone standing outside my window. That thought weighed down every step as I moved toward the porch, as if the floor itself was trying to hold me back. The moment I opened the door, wind and rain slammed against my face. I flinched for a second, but forced myself forward, raising the bat to chest height. Every heartbeat pounded like war drums, driving me out into the shimmering, rain-slicked yard. I knew one thing: if I stepped back now, the fear would swallow us whole. The only choice left was to confront it. The porch light spilled across the wall, and that's when I froze. The figure came into view. Tall, hood pulled low, clothes soaked through, pressed tight against the corner of the house. Half his face showed beneath the brim of the hood. Pale, rigid, almost like a mask. No words, no movement. He just stood there, staring straight at me. The storm seemed to vanish around us, leaving only a silence so heavy it crushed the air from my lungs. My fingers locked around the bat until my knuckles turned white. The only sound I could hear was the hammering of my own heart, like it was about to burst. He didn't step forward. He didn't back away. He just watched. A cold, hollow gaze like I was prey caught in a hunter's sight. I let out a roar, more to drown out my own fear than anything else, and charged straight for the corner. Rain stung my face, the bat trembling in my grip as I swung toward him. But when I reached the spot, there was nothing. Just rainwater dripping steadily from the roof. Gone. I gritted my teeth and sprinted around the house. The golden light washed over the yard, but the gazebo was empty, and no one hid behind the trees. I pressed deeper toward the forest edge, my shoes sinking into the soaked earth, eyes straining to pierce the shifting shadows of the undergrowth. But the figure was gone, completely. As if he had never existed at all. The wide yard now held nothing but the roar of the rain, lightning tearing across the sky, and the pounding of my heart in my chest. I stopped dead in the middle of the lawn, the bat heavy in my grip, cold sweat mixing with the rain sliding down my spine. The downpour smothered everything, its steady rhythm like a thick curtain of sound. But that rhythm only made it worse because it drowned out anything else. If someone was moving out there, in the darkness of the forest or along the wall, I wouldn't hear a thing. My eyes swept the yard. The porch light spilled golden reflections across the slick ground, but it couldn't erase the unease crawling over my skin. Every hair on the back of my neck stood on end, because deep down in my gut, I knew I wasn't standing there alone. Something or someone was hiding in the rain, silently tracking my every move. I drew in a long breath, forcing myself to turn my back on the drenched yard. The heavy wooden door shut behind me, the click of the lock snapping like a temporary reprieve. In the living room, my wife and son sat huddled together. I forced a thin smile and kept my voice as steady as I could. "It's fine now. He's gone." But even as I said it, I didn't believe a word. My son pressed tight against his mother's chest, eyes wide with fear. His voice quivered in a whisper. "Dad, he'll come back." I saw him at my window. That night, he refused to sleep in his own room. We let him curl up between us on the narrow bed. Even when his breathing finally slowed, wrapped tight in his blanket, I lay awake. Outside, the rain kept falling, and I couldn't shake the feeling he had never left. Years have passed, but whenever a storm pounds the windows at night, that memory crashes back through me like an icy wind. I know the truth. The hooded man never disappeared. He simply pulled back, hiding somewhere out there, waiting for another night to return. My son is grown now, but the fear still lingers in his eyes. Sometimes, when thunder rattles the sky, he'll quietly draw the curtains and whisper, "Dad." I still see him standing outside the window, and I never answer, because deep down, I believe it too. That invisible gaze has never left us patient, watchful, and the image of that figure standing motionless in the storm will forever remain a scar etched into both our lives. I grew up in a town so small you'd have to zoom in on the map just to see its name. The land was dry, the sun relentless, and rain was a rare privilege. When it did come, it was usually nothing more than a quick sprinkle that vanished as fast as it arrived. The older folks used to joke, "Here, a real rainstorm is like a guest who almost never knocks on your door." In friend, that's why whenever it rained, the entire town seemed to change rhythm, slowing down, growing quiet, with everyone sitting by their windows just to listen. That night, the rain didn't ask permission. The wind started in the afternoon, rattling the tin signs on the roadside. By 9 o'clock, the clouds had piled into a heavy black mass, pressing down on the sky, until suddenly they split open. Rain came down in sheets, heavy as gravel pouring from above. Streetlights flickered, their glow chopped into fragments by millions of falling drops. Lightning tore through the clouds like someone slicing them with a sharp blade. My room was on the ground floor, the window facing a stretch of concrete road where kids rode their bikes during the day. Inside, my whole world fit into a 27-inch screen, a blue LED strip glowing behind it, the sharp clack of my mechanical keyboard, and a pair of over-ear headphones sealing me off. I was in voice chat with friends, one living in a beach city, another in the capital while I was stuck here in this forgotten town. In my ears, someone laughed. "Your ping's crazy low tonight, man. Take the shot." I tossed back a reply, fingers tapping in rhythm with the rain drumming on the roof. I'd always liked that sound, like a blanket of noise wrapping around the house, shutting the rest of the world out. But that night, the blanket had a tear in it. In the middle of reloading, I glanced out the window. There was someone standing across the street. A gray hoodie, hood pulled low, arms hanging loosely, head tilted down. He stood perfectly still, like a post in the ground. No shiver, no shifting weight, no gesture to shield himself from the storm the way anyone else would. A bolt of lightning flashed across the sky, turning the whole street into an eerie negative image, every shape outlined in harsh white. For a split second, I saw it clearly, water streaming off the edge of his hood, dripping in steady beads from the chin hidden in shadow. I blinked. The game snapped me back. Push A sight. Cover. I jerked my mouse, fired a burst. But when I looked back outside, the street was empty. Just a shallow puddle rippling under the flickering lamp. Hallucination, I muttered. Rain does that. Distorts things. I muted my mic so my friends wouldn't hear the edge in my breathing. But from that moment on, part of my mind was no longer in the game. It was stuck across the street, staring at the spot where a gray shape had been standing. When the round ended, I pulled off my headset. The blue LED behind my monitor made my skin look pale, almost sickly. I rubbed my eyes and forced a laugh at myself. But the laugh froze when thunder cracked, and somewhere close, the glass of my window gave a faint, sharp rattle. I slid open the door to the porch, pretending I just needed fresh air. In truth, I needed to check. Rain sprayed across my face instantly, the air thick with the raw scent of wet earth. In this town, every real rainstorm came with that smell, like the whole ground had just opened its lungs and exhaled at once. The corner of the street was maybe 100 feet from my porch, marked by an old road sign with letters so faded they were barely there anymore. And right beneath that sign, he was standing. The gray hoodie. His silhouette was taller than me, by at least half a head. He stood perfectly straight, too straight for someone caught in a downpour. While anyone else would have hunched forward or crossed their arms against the cold, he stood like a statue, rain hammering down on him as if he couldn't feel it. I couldn't see his eyes, but I could feel his gaze. It was the same sensation you get when a camera lens points directly at you, not touching you, not making a sound, but stabbing straight into the center of your chest. In that instant, my spine tingled like someone had dragged a fingernail right down the middle of my back. Who in their right mind would be out walking in a storm like this? I whispered to myself. Then, desperate to anchor my thoughts in something normal, I answered, maybe it's the night guard from the market, making his rounds. But the night guard never wore a gray hoodie in the rain. He wore a plastic helmet, always carried a flashlight. I stepped back inside and slid the window shut until I heard the click of the lock. That small sound gave me a fake sense of safety, as if a thin latch could keep the storm or whatever was in it away from me. I sat back at my desk, pretending I had just gone for water. The mouse, the keyboard, the glowing screen, everything looked exactly the same, like I had never left. But my heartbeat was still out there, waiting at the corner with him. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Did you forget?" I frowned. A second message followed almost immediately, pushing the first down the screen. "I know you haven't." 2 lines. No greeting, no hesitation, no introduction. Whoever it was, they were certain I was the one they meant, certain I owed them a memory. I opened my group chat. "Which one of you is messing with me?" "Not me, bro." As that was note, "I'm literally streaming a movie right now." Another friend snapped a picture from behind the wheel, halfway home on the freeway. At that hour, none of them had time to pull a stunt like this. I pressed and held the number, tapped call back. The response came instantly. "This number does not exist." Outside, the storm roared on, But inside my house, a strange silence pressed down on me, heavier than the rain. I tried to rationalize. Maybe it was a burner sim, maybe a spoofed number, maybe some glitch with the carrier. I was a logical guy. I liked solving problems with numbers I could measure. Ping at 25 milliseconds. Network on 5 gigahertzes. Battery at 63%. RAM usage at 78%. If I clung to those numbers, it felt like I was clinging to a railing on a slippery ledge. But then, a thought slipped through every wall of logic. If it wasn't a person, then what was it? I locked my screen and set the phone face down, like turning it over could somehow trap whatever had reached out. My eyes drifted up to the clock on the wall. The second hand seemed to crawl slower than usual. Or maybe it only felt that way because I couldn't stop staring at it. When you're alone at home during a storm, every sound feels amplified. The drain gurgling can sound like someone clearing their throat. The wind seeping through the cracks can mimic a faint whisper, as if someone is calling your name. I know all of that, but a doorbell? That's not something you can mistake. 12:19 a.m. The bell went off like someone was pressing down hard and refusing to let go. Relentless, urgent, almost aggressive. I jumped up so fast my knee slammed into the desk, pain shot through me, but I didn't make a sound. I froze by the curtain, pulling it just enough to peek outside. Rain poured down like a white wall. The porch light bled into a sickly yellow halo, flickering with each gust of wind. No one was there. Yet the bell kept screaming, as if daring me to answer. Should I open it? The question popped into my head, stupid and reckless. Of course not. You don't open the door when someone's hammering the bell in the middle of a storm at midnight. But my body didn't listen. My hand drifted toward the handle, as if pulled by invisible strings. My fingers brushed the cold metal, and then, lightning split the sky. For one terrifying frame of light, the whole scene froze, and I saw him. A figure burst from the porch, sprinting into the narrow alley beside my house. His foot slipped on the soaked tiles. Then he disappeared into the dark. The bell stopped. Silence slammed down, leaving only the crushing weight of the rain. I staggered back until my spine hit the wall. My palms were slick with sweat, but cold, like I'd plunged them into ice water. Part of my mind whispered, "Call the cops." Another voice pushed back, "And say what? That someone rang your doorbell and ran?" I shook my head, trying to fling the thought away. Then another sound came. Clear, close, impossible to mistake. Knock, knock, knock. This time, from my bedroom window. At first, soft, then harder, faster, until the glass rattled in its frame, each thud sending a shiver through the wooden wall. I didn't dare breathe, afraid even that would give me away. Slowly, I pulled the curtain back another inch. Cold, damp air slipped through like the edge of a knife, and there, right against the glass, was a face. The gray hoodie clung to his forehead, soaked through. Rain ran down both temples, dripping from his chin. His eyes, if you could call them that, were wide open, unblinking, impossible to pin to any color under the lightning. That stare wasn't just at me, it felt like it pierced through me, threading something cold straight down my spine and pulling tight. And then came the smile. It unfolded slowly, warping to one side, exposing teeth that looked ghostly pale under the storm's light. Not a friendly grin, not even a smirk. It was the kind of expression a face makes when holding on to some twisted memory and taking pleasure in the fact that I was now standing in the middle of it. I stumbled back a step, my knees knocking so hard they almost gave out. My throat was dry, burning, even though outside, the storm could have drowned the whole town. "Who are you?" I wanted to say, but no sound came out. On the other side of the glass, he no longer knocked. He just pressed his face against it, staring. The next bolt of lightning lit him up for a split second, and in that flash, I saw something faint on the window, right where his breath hit the glass. A fogged mark, a shape drawn by accident, or on purpose, that vanished as quickly as it appeared. Then he pulled away. Not the way a normal person steps back, but smoothly, almost like someone rewinding a tape. Fluid, silent, without a single wasted movement. For a moment, I could still hear his footsteps splashing in the flooded street. Then the storm swallowed them whole. I stood frozen until the skin on my arms went numb from the cold. Finally, I forced myself forward, slid the latch, and cracked the window just enough for the storm air to rush in. The smell of wet earth surged inside. On the outside pane, plastered to the glass, was a soaked piece of paper, its edges shredded by the wind. I reached out and peeled it free. The adhesive tore with a faint rip. The sheet was so waterlogged it nearly fell apart in my hands. Under the light of my desk lamp, the ink had bled and blurred, but 3 words were still clear enough to read. Did you forget? 3 words. Simple. Merciless. I swallowed hard. If it was a prank, it was far too elaborate for a random stormy night. If it was a warning, then it demanded a past I couldn't find. I searched my memory, old classmates, neighbors, broken promises. Nothing fit. All I felt was the weightless panic of standing on a flooded floor, never knowing which step would find solid wood and which would drop me straight through. As the night dragged on, the storm eased. The pounding rain thinned into a drizzle, then stopped completely near dawn. I didn't sleep. I just sat there, watching the paper dry in patches on my desk. When daylight finally came, I stepped onto the porch. On the concrete, water had preserved a trail of footprints, large, deep, moving in a straight line toward the corner of the street where I'd first seen him, and then they stopped, cut off clean, as if the ground beyond had erased them. Just blank pavement, just silence. In the days that followed, I tried to explain it away with logic. The text messages, a spoofed number, the doorbell, maybe neighborhood kids hiding in the storm, the face at the window, a drunk looking for shelter, the paper, some cruel joke. But the pieces never fit. The exact time, 12:19 a.m. The way he stood unshaken in the storm, that twisted grin, those unblinking eyes, the footprints ending as if at the edge of something unseen. And above all, those words, "Did you forget?" It wasn't a request. It wasn't a threat. It was a pit opening beneath me, daring me to look down. Since then, I've changed. I notice the sky more when it darkens. My windows are always covered with heavy curtains. If the doorbell rings after 11 p.m., I don't answer. Unknown numbers on my phone, I silence them. Friends tell me I'm overthinking, that storms make people imagine things. I laugh it off, but the truth is this. People who have never seen a crooked smile pressed against a pane of glass will always believe everything can be explained. A few months later, the town had another rainstorm. Not as heavy as that night, but enough to slow everything down. From a distance, I looked at the same window where his face had once been pressed against the glass. If I tilted my head at the right angle, catching the light just right, I could see it. A faint streak, as if someone had once traced a quick mark with their fingertip. Then the moisture faded, leaving behind a glossy outline, a scar on the glass. It looked like the hook of a letter, maybe a J or an L. Or maybe it was nothing at all, just the random trail of a raindrop. I couldn't tell. But ever since I noticed it, I haven't dared to wipe it away. Some part of me fears that if I erased it, whatever left it there would take it as proof that I had truly forgotten. From then on, every storm came with a ritual. Check the doors, check the curtains, check the clock, check the phone, and always, always before going to bed, I glance at that faint mark on the window, like staring at an old scar that never heals. I never saw him again. No more texts. No more knocking. The town stayed the same, dry, small, starved for rain. I switched jobs, started keeping a normal 9 to 5, played fewer late-night games. The blue LED behind my monitor glows sometimes, sometimes not. The doorbell rings only in daylight now for deliveries, groceries, the mailman. But one thing hasn't changed. On stormy nights, I still wake up. Not because of thunder, but because of a distinct feeling that I've stepped too close to the edge of something deep, and that someone is standing on the other side of the pit, waiting, patient, for me to slip. People who know me sometimes ask, "So, what exactly did you forget?" I've asked myself that question long enough to realize the answer might not belong to this world, or maybe it's a piece of memory I was never supposed to dig up. Never supposed to. Words that sound paranoid in daylight, but in the middle of a storm, they carry weight. One night, I opened my messaging app and typed in that old number. The system still said it didn't exist. I typed a line, then erased it. I don't remember anything. I typed again, then deleted. "Who are you?" In the end, I left the box empty and locked the screen. Some questions dig the hole deeper the more you ask them, and I was afraid if I kept going, I'd fall straight in. Before turning off the light, I stepped out onto the porch. The rain had eased to a drizzle. At the corner of the street, the faded road sign still stood, a mute witness to everything. I stared at it until my eyes stung. Then I went back inside, locked the door, checked the latch again, and told myself, there's nothing out there. Only, I don't fully believe it. If I had to put a period on my story, it would land here. I still live in that town, still walk past that window with its faint streak like a letter I can't read, still tense at the sound of a doorbell after midnight, still know that 12:19 a.m. is a time best left undisturbed. I haven't seen him again, but that doesn't mean he's gone. Maybe he's only shifted his spot from across the street to some other corner of my vision. And every time the rain comes down, without thinking, I find myself looking for him. One day, if the rain ever comes back the way it did that night, thick, heavy, unrelenting, I know I'll find myself standing inside the glass again. And somewhere out there, someone will be standing on the other side, the border between us no stronger than a sheet of wet curtain. And maybe, just maybe, there will be another piece of paper pressed against the window, with the same 3 words. Did you forget? I don't know if I ever truly forgot anything, but I do know one thing for certain. I've never stopped remembering that storm. And maybe that's exactly the answer he wanted. Everything happened in a single breath. The ceiling lights flickered one last time, then went out. The Queen Mary, too, a massive steel giant, the pride of a century of ocean travel, suddenly sank into a suffocating darkness in the middle of the Atlantic. In an instant, the elegant banquet turned into a cavernous void. Only the red emergency lights remained, flickering like congealed blood, casting terrified faces and stretching distorted shadows across the walls. The sharp crash of glass shattering cut through the silence. Someone screamed, someone whispered a prayer, and then the most terrifying part. The engines fell silent. That steady, low hum, the steel heartbeat that had lulled me to sleep for nights, was gone completely. In that deadly silence, I felt the giant vessel drifting powerless, like a floating coffin released to the mercy of the Atlantic currents. The air in the room grew heavier, as if stripped of oxygen. Each thud of my heart slammed against my chest, echoing alongside the ragged breathing of thousands of passengers trapped in the same fear. I knew, in that moment, this could be the most dangerous hour of my life. What haunted me wasn't the darkness, it was the silence. For days before, the engines had roared, steady and constant, like the pulse of some enormous creature. That sound had become so familiar, I didn't notice it until it disappeared. And now, its absence pressed down on us, so thick that my ears rang, as if the ocean outside had swallowed every trace of noise. Then, the intercom crackled to life, a male voice echoing through the corridor. Attention passengers, we are currently power failure. Remain. Do not attempt to. Static tore through the message, then nothing. A suffocating silence stretched on. I looked around, faces, pale under the dim red glow, warped into grotesque shapes. Eyes wide, imagining the worst. The ship spinning out of control, explosions in the dark, or slowly sinking into the icy Atlantic. So did my mind. Every broken sentence from the intercom wasn't reassurance. It felt like an unfinished curse, forcing each of us to fill in the blanks with our deepest fears. Just hours earlier, the Commodore Club had been warm and golden, cocktails sparkling under chandeliers, conversations blending with the gentle notes of a piano. But now, as the ship drowned in darkness, that same space had transformed into something unrecognizable. The red emergency lights flickered from the corners of the walls, stretching shadows across the ceiling, warped and twisted like frozen mannequins. A room that had once radiated elegance was now a bizarre stage, where every movement carried an edge of unease. From a hidden corner came the sound of muffled sobbing. Another passenger's voice cut sharply through the darkness, demanding answers from a crew member who stumbled over their words. No one had any answers. The air grew heavier, colder, as the heating system died along with the engines. I felt the change in every breath, my exhale visible as faint mist under the dim red glow. Men pulled their jackets tighter. Women wrapped scarves around themselves, clutching their children close. The chill of the Atlantic seeped through every crack in the ship's steel frame. In the chaos, Tom found me. His hand gripped mine, trembling yet steadying me, his eyes fixed on the void ahead. He leaned in close, his voice low and hoarse in a way I'd never heard before. "This is bad." And when I heard those words from Tom, the man who had weathered countless courtroom battles, who had always stayed calm under pressure, I knew the fear had reached the very core of reality. Around 2 in the morning, when the lounge had sunk into a deep freeze and the atmosphere felt so dense it could snap in half, the ceiling speakers suddenly crackled to life. At first, it was a shrill burst of static, scraping like metal against steel, making everyone flinch. Then came the familiar voice of Captain Williams, but this time, it was different. Heavy, low, and shaking, as if every word he spoke was caught in his throat. "Ladies and gentlemen," he hesitated. The sound echoed through the speakers as though it came from far away, lost against the howl of wind outside. "I must be completely honest with you. We have lost all main power systems, and our backup generators have also failed. At this moment, the Queen Mary 2 is running only on emergency batteries. Time remaining, approximately 18 hours. Every sound in the room died instantly. I could hear my heartbeat hammering in my chest, blending with the ragged breaths of those around me. Then the captain's voice returned, this time clipped, urgent. "We have already sent out a distress signal. Nearby vessels are being mobilized. Please remain calm, stay orderly, and wait for further updates." As a quieter, the speakers crackled again, then cut off. Silence swallowed everything once more. I scanned the room. The red emergency lights pulsed faintly overhead, casting pale, ghostly light onto terrified faces and wide, unblinking eyes. A woman covered her mouth, sobbing into her hands, her cries smothered by the cavernous space. A middle-aged man shot to his feet, only to collapse back into his chair, head in his hands. 18 hours. That number echoed in my head like an invisible countdown clock. None of us said it out loud, but we all understood. If the engineers couldn't restore power within that time, this ship would sink into absolute darkness. No lights, no circulating air, no communication, no rescue. I looked at Tom. The red glow cast across his face stretched shadows into a mask-like outline. He said nothing, only gripped my hand tighter. In his eyes, I saw both determination and raw fear. For the first time since boarding this vessel, I no longer felt like a passenger on a luxurious vacation. I was just another fragile life, drifting across the vast Atlantic, waiting for whatever fate had in store. The hours that followed were a waking nightmare, each sense pushed to its breaking point. First came the water. The taps in the cabins coughed out a few choking spurts, then fell silent. No drinking water, no cooking water, not even enough to wash our hands. I heard children crying out in thirst, the hushed voices of parents trying to share the last drops from half-empty bottles. Then came sanitation. The waste systems shut down, and within hours, a sour stench began to seep through the corridors. The proud ship quickly devolved into a stifling steel box where comfort no longer existed. Food dwindled. No kitchens, no heat, no hot meals. The crew distributed dry rations, hard and meager, one packet at a time, to 2,600 people. I still remember holding a tiny cracker and a small carton of milk. It wasn't enough to quiet the gnawing hunger, but in that endless night, it was all we had. The hollow, desperate stares of those around me said it all. Fear was already drowning patience. Then came the cold, the final enemy. With no heat, no warmth, the Atlantic crept through the steel frame, lowering the temperature hour by hour. My breath fogged in front of me, faint and ghostly in the dim light. People layered everything they owned onto their bodies, sweaters, scarves, even bedsheets stripped from cabins. Groups of passengers huddled together, clinging for warmth. I watched a family wrap their child in 3 blankets, the mother's eyes shining with a mix of panic and helplessness. For 16 hours, the Queen Mary 2 was no longer a symbol of grandeur, but a massive ghost drifting across the ocean. And I, among the shivering crowd under the flicker of red emergency lights, realized the sea doesn't need storms to bring terror. Silence, cold, and darkness are more than enough. By the 17th hour, another chilling truth struck. The satellite systems went dead. No signals, no data, no contact of any kind with the outside world. In that moment, I felt as if this massive ship had simply vanished. As if the Queen Mary 2 had been erased from the map, drifting into some undefined void. The ocean around us stretched endlessly, cold and eerily still. I pictured my family on the far side of the Atlantic. They were waiting, still believing that in just 2 days we would arrive in New York, stepping off the ship with smiles and luggage in hand. They had no idea that at that very moment, we were huddled in darkness, hungry, freezing, and counting down each passing hour like a slow tightening sentence. No signals, no messages. To the outside world, we had simply disappeared. In the dim red glow of the emergency lights, I saw blank stares, wide eyes filled with panic. A passenger whispered, "Does anyone out there even know we're still alive?" The question hung in the air, then dissolved into a dreadful silence. No one answered. Only the soft roar of the Atlantic waves slapping against the steel hull remained a chilling reminder that out here we were nothing more than a tiny, meaningless speck, easily swallowed and forgotten. The clock hands crept toward the fatal mark. Just 2 hours of emergency power left before the ship would be plunged into complete and final darkness. No one spoke it aloud, but we all knew. If the system wasn't restored by then, it would be the end. And then, in that suffocating silence, a faint sound rose from deep within the ship. At first, just a metallic shiver, then a low hum, weak but undeniable. I looked up, my chest tightening with shock. The emergency lights flickered once, then brightened. The dull red shadows on the walls slowly gave way to a fragile yellow glow, trembling like a candle in a storm. Heads lifted, hollow eyes caught the light, now glimmering with a fragile spark of hope. The engineers had done it. They'd managed to restart part of the backup generator. It wasn't strong enough to bring back the glittering chandeliers or the grand dinners, but it was enough to restore the essentials: circulating air, a little light, and most importantly, satellite communication. A cheer broke out from somewhere, faint but real, spreading quickly. Not the joy of triumph, but the gasp of relief from those who had nearly suffocated. In that moment, I saw Tom exhale, gripping my shoulder firmly. His face was still tense, but in his eyes shone a light we hadn't seen once during that long, dark night. Hope had returned, fragile, trembling, stretched thin like a wire over an abyss, but just enough to hold 2,600 souls back from the edge of despair. The next morning, as the pale sunlight of the Atlantic broke through heavy gray clouds, we saw what for hours we had only dared to pray for: ships appearing on the horizon, 3 of them massive steel giants, looming like floating fortresses. They moved steadily closer, slow but deliberate, to reach our dying vessel. Their deep horns echoed across the sea, a sound that felt like it was pulling us back from the void. When the crews from the rescue ships finally boarded, I saw their sweat-soaked faces, arms straining under the weight of enormous equipment: portable generators, crates of fresh water, boxes of food, and entire teams of specialized engineers. Shouts rang out. Steel cables clanged as they were thrown across. Engines roared, all of it merging into a chaotic symphony of survival. We, the passengers already weakened by hunger and cold, crowded the decks, watching as each crate was lifted aboard like pieces of a miracle. Someone burst into tears as a cold bottle of water was placed in their hands. A young boy clutched a box of biscuits, smiling through tears, streaking his face. But the rescue was far from simple. Engineers from the 3 ships worked side by side with the Queen Mary II's own crew, laboring without pause, day and night. Sparks flew in the engine room, the clang of hammers rang out, the echo of steel against steel reverberated through the ship's hollow corridors. 4 days. 4 long days we remained in scarcity, but at least there was light, water, food. And above all, there was hope. Then, on a morning after more than 96 tense hours, I heard it. A deep rumble rising from the belly of the ship. The engines. This time, not the faltering, broken rhythm from before, but steady, powerful, like a heart reborn after it had stopped. The Queen Mary II slowly pulled forward, powering herself toward New York. Sluggish, heavy, but proud like a warrior returning from the edge of death. When we finally saw the glow of the city reflecting off the water after so many days of darkness, I knew this voyage would remain etched forever, not only in my memory, but in the memory of all 2,600 souls who survived together in the heart of the Atlantic. After we docked in New York, what had happened aboard the Queen Mary II immediately became the subject of investigation. Engineers, maritime experts, even the press wanted to know How could a modern ship, advertised as unsinkable before the Atlantic, fall into total paralysis? The final conclusion was shocking and chilling. It wasn't the storm. It wasn't human error. It was a hidden design flaw in the power management system. Once a single component failed, it triggered a chain reaction, spreading through the entire circuit. Instead of keeping the main power and the backup systems separate as independent safeguards, both collapsed at the same time, like dominoes falling in unison. Just one small gap in the design had turned a colossal ship into a powerless hulk, drifting aimlessly across the Atlantic. When I heard this, a chill ran through me. If a maritime legend like the Queen Mary II could be brought to its knees by a technical flaw, then how many other ships out there were carrying the same ticking time bomb? I remembered that night when darkness swallowed everything, the silence after the engines died, and I realized, sometimes, it isn't the raging sea or the fury of waves that pulls us under, but the invisible flaws of our own making. Since that voyage, I have never looked at cruise ships the same way again. Before, I thought of them as floating cities, unshakable fortresses where modern technology and skilled engineers could tame the ocean itself. But after sitting in total blackout, in the freezing dark, listening to the steel groan under the weight of the sea, I came to a chilling truth. Those massive steel giants are not invincible. They are fragile shells, surviving only through a complex web of technology. And when that web collapses, human beings are left utterly powerless. Now, whenever I see a cruise commercial on television, the smiling faces of passengers under the sun, cocktails sparkling in their hands, bright blue pools glittering on deck, a different image crashes into my mind. Not relaxation, but those hours of helplessness in the middle of the Atlantic, freezing, starving, and suffocating in silence. And I know more than ever, the ocean doesn't care about advanced engineering or human confidence. You can build ships so large you call them floating cities. You can fill them with the latest technology. But when the sea and the machines betray you together, it all crumbles into illusion. And it was in that contrast, the glowing images of advertisements against the haunting memory of reality, that I realized a truth. What people build to sell as safety is only a thin coat of paint over the cold indifference of the ocean. But let's go back to the beginning. On the fourth day at sea, Tom and I were sitting in the Britannia restaurant. Crystal chandeliers hung overhead, their golden light shimmering across gowns and glittering glasses of wine. Then, suddenly, all that light began to flicker. Only a few seconds, but enough to silence the lively conversations. Passengers looked up, faces etched with confusion. The servers forced polite smiles as they continued clearing plates, but their eyes betrayed the worry they tried to hide. Before we could exchange words, the intercom crackled on. Captain Williams' voice came through, steady and calm, like a lullaby meant to soothe. "Ladies and gentlemen, just a minor issue with the electrical system. Our engineers have it under control. All safety systems remain fully operational. There is no cause for concern." His voice blended with the clinking of silverware that resumed across the room, as if patching over the unease with a thin layer of normalcy. But inside me, and in Tom too, a small question had already begun to take shape. A question that, just days later, would grow into the worst nightmare of my life. The next day, Tom and I attended a lecture in the ship's planetarium. The dome above was dark, scattered with thousands of projected stars, while the voice of the speaker, a marine biologist, echoed smoothly, describing the migration paths of whales. Everything felt calm, dreamlike, as if suspended between sea and sky. Then the lights flickered again. The simulated sky fractured into broken patches, trembling as though the heavens themselves were shaking. At the same time, I heard a change deep below the floor of the engines, which for days had pulsed steadily, now shifted into a stuttering rhythm, like a giant heart skipping its beats. The speaker froze. He lifted his head, listening, his brow furrowed into a sharp crease. In the hushed room, passengers turned to each other, searching for answers in each other's eyes. But moments later, he resumed the lecture, his voice faintly trembling, pretending nothing had happened. I sat in the dim glow, but by then, the truth was undeniable. The Queen Mary, too, had just sent a signal faint, fragile, but clear enough to foreshadow a nightmare. And looking back, it's almost impossible to believe that everything began so beautifully. From the very first days after leaving Southampton, the voyage felt like a journey of renewal. By day, Tom and I enjoyed elegant afternoon teas in sunlit rooms. The lectures on art, science, and maritime history transported us back in time, as if we were living inside a piece of history itself. By night, the grand dinners in the main dining hall, glasses of wine shimmering under chandeliers, made the ship feel like a floating palace in the middle of the ocean. I had felt completely safe. The Queen Mary II, built in 2003 with cutting-edge technology, was equipped with backup electrical systems, satellite communications, reserve generators, and enough lifeboats for twice the number of passengers on board. Captain Williams, with more than 30 years of experience crossing the Atlantic, spoke daily over the intercom in a calm, steady voice, an anchor of reassurance for every passenger. In those moments, I truly believed I was living a dream, carried by technology and human ingenuity. I never imagined that just days later, that dream would shatter into a nightmare that would haunt me forever. In September 2019, Tom and I decided to do something we hadn't dared since our college years: take a long voyage together. He had just been promoted to senior partner at his law firm, a milestone after years of relentless work. I can still remember the night he called me, his voice hoarse but charged with excitement. We need to celebrate. This time, not just a rushed dinner, but a real trip. We had both just come out of exhausting divorces. Those heavy months had drained us, leaving us uncertain how to feel joy again. That suggestion was like a lifeline tossed into a whirlpool. Tom, my older brother, always private, always serious, suddenly proposed a transatlantic crossing, Southampton to New York, on the Queen Mary II. I froze for a few seconds. The Queen Mary II, the legendary liner, an icon of luxury and old-world crossings. The name alone conjured images of polished wooden halls, elegant banquets, and the feeling of stepping into living maritime history. I agreed immediately. Deep down, I believed this trip would help us rediscover happiness, and more importantly, mend the bond of brotherhood we had let slip away in the grind of daily life. I had no idea that what seemed like a simple decision would lead us into the most extraordinary and terrifying experience of our lives. Rain has always carried two faces. To many, it is purity washing away the dust, bringing life, humming a gentle lullaby across rooftops. But tonight, after walking through 4 true horror stories together, you and I both understand, rain can conceal something far darker. It blurs the boundary between what is real and what is waiting, hidden just beyond that curtain of falling water. Remember this: the people in tonight's 4 stories once thought rain was harmless. They believed they were only facing nature, only weathering a storm. But no, beneath that cold, wet veil, footsteps vanished, shadows spread. Faces appeared in windows where no one lived. The downpour was never just water, it was a curtain. A perfect disguise for something that knows how to wait, how to endure, and how to emerge at the very moment you are weakest. I can still hear it now, the pounding of rain against glass, streaming into dark alleys, hammering on tin rooftops. The rhythm repeats like a heartbeat, like a knock on a door you'd rather keep shut. Listen long enough, and the raindrops begin to feel arranged, deliberate, a sequence, a code, maybe even a voice trying to speak. And sometimes I wonder, is rain truly random, or has it always been whispering something we just haven't yet understood? Imagine this: when the sky cracks open and the storm descends, your ears lose clarity. That is the moment when other things can move closer. They advance, slipping through the roar of water, hidden by its endless hiss. No one notices because the storm swallows every sound, and by the time you realize you are not alone, it's already too late. These 4 stories tonight are 4 reminders. Rain doesn't protect you. Rain isolates you. Rain drowns your screams. It erases the evidence. That is why it has always been the perfect ally for the things we fear most. No one sees what's crawling through the sheets of water until it's already here. Perhaps you yourself have felt it before walking alone down a darkened street, clothes drenched, heart pounding faster. The streetlights flickered, their glow distorted by the rain, stretching shapes until they looked unnatural. And then you froze, because for just a moment you swore you heard footsteps behind you. Of course you turned. But the storm blurred everything, and there was nothing there. Or at least, nothing your eyes were able to see. That chill, that prickling at the back of your neck. That's why we tell these stories. Not to frighten without reason, but to remind ourselves that the world is stranger and far more dangerous than we want to admit. Every raindrop is a curtain. Every shadow it casts could be hiding a pair of eyes. Tonight, you and I have passed through 4 fragments of truth, 4 stories that leave damp, lingering stains in the mind. And now, as this screen fades and the video draws to a close, ask yourself, the next time you hear rain tapping against your window, are you certain it's only the wind outside? Or is something else standing there, waiting? Thank you for staying with Untold 365 until the very end. If these stories made you shiver, give this video a like, hit subscribe, and leave the number 2 in the comments so I'll know you want more true and terrifying stories. Because here, on Untold 365, every passing day is another fragment of darkness. And don't forget, the next storm may bring more than just water. It may carry the beginning of a brand new nightmare. Goodbye, and until we meet again in the next episode.